Ooh. All right. Sorry, Jason. I'm
Oh,
sorry. I'm sorry, Jason. Anyway, um, so if you're listening to this by audio, Jason just saw the video that we're going to be doing, and he's already lamenting the fact that
I
he
am.
signed up and clicked the link to come into today's show. He's already lamenting it before he even gets started. So let me start with this. Um, I think we can talk about this publicly, Jason. We're the fact that we're going to be doing, what do we want to call it? An event, a Knox Unplugged
An
live.
event,
What
Knox
an
Unplugged
event?
live
Yeah,
event.
yeah. The Knox Unplugged live event. We're going to be doing one live in Nashville. Did we think the 13th? I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah.
With David Fowler, and we're hoping to get George Grant. We don't have him signed up yet, but that's the goal. Um, and there's only going to be 50 seats that are going to be available for this. And what we've been trying to think of something to do that um, we could have in person. It's kind of like a class, but not really. It's kind of like a conference, but not really. Something that's way more interactive. Something that's like us sitting in a room and having a conversation with each other naturally, and people get to engage and have questions and kind of talk through a lot of things that we work through here on Knox Unplug and deal with kind of core what we think are core problems that if we get right, we will start to see a domino effect of secularism unraveling.
Right.
Is that fair? That's probably the best. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
that. Um, and to use some of the weapons that we've been trying to develop here on Knox Unplugged, some of the poetic weapons, and talk about the family and the source of that, the impact that fatherhood really has. Jason, I know that there's a lot of things for me to engage with culturally. I know there's a lot of battles out there, but the one that I feel like the most important battle for me to fight is to be a good husband and to be a good father. There is nothing. Um, if I have to miss a march or miss a voting tally to go and love my wife and love on my kids, I will miss every last one of them, because that for
Right.
me is, and I don't want to put those two things against each other, but I think sometimes the way that we fight, we forget that that really is the thing that all the secularism wants us to stop doing. They want
Right.
us to get busy like them and forget our duties,
Right. And that, um, which is a refusal to remember how the world works.
Right. Right. So, anyway, I was just bringing that up because I wanted people to know what we're doing, what we're trying to do. And if you guys are interested in coming to Nashville, we've tried to do something really simple, which is like keep the tickets to $50 and just cover the event and what we're doing. We just want to get together and fellowship and
Yeah.
try to have something beyond the screen and the podcast to be able to engage with folks outside of emails to answer questions, just face-to-face fellowship for that day. And so we got a great event that we're planning on working through. But there's only 50 seats. So if you're around the area and you want to come and you want to fellowship and hang out, I think you're going to find the combination between David Fowler and the law, and of course, give me anything George Grant. I don't care. He can talk about tennis shoes, and I'm
Right.
there for him. And then Jason, and working through the cosmos and some of the issues of Gnosticism. So I just want to let people know about that. What email should they send? Like,
Oh,
should I give them your email if they want to inquire about coming, or?
yeah, we could do that. Although I'm not going to be the one that knows all the answers. That's yet.
What?
I mean,
Out of all the things we do on Knox Unplugged, you don't have the answer, Sway? You don't have the answers?
But they can, I mean, we'll probably have to set up something for them to a sign up page or something, right?
Yeah, let's do this. How about we have people send emails to contact@fightlaughfeast.com. That way I get those, and I'll be able to let everybody know once we get the sign up page going, we can have those 50 slots available. And we'll do Nashville because we do our conference in Nashville. David Fowler's in Nashville. It seems like to be an easy enough hub. I think I would like to do something like this in multiple states. I would like to hit up Dallas next and do something like this down there, and maybe Florida. Definitely got to do something in Spokane, Washington.
Yeah.
So I think we want to do a bunch of these kind of almost like coffee shop talks, or knocks and plugs, but kind of try and make an event of the day and get to people's town, and just trying to do it for a small group. 50, if 100 show up, then great, but we only are allocating a 50 person setup. That's what we're planning for. So that's what we have room for. If 100 people show up, it'd be interesting. I have to figure out something, but that's not what we're doing. It's 50.
No,
50 setup.
We'll have fun with whoever shows up, but
of course, so there's going to be a party there, but it's going to be 50. So about 2 weeks ago, I ran across a clip. It's actually just been percolating for about 3, maybe a month. But Jason, we do shows and we'll talk, and I'm not always ready for the conversation that we have. You know what I mean? Like I'm there. I'm just not always ready. And so we'll talk, and then it'll sit with me for like maybe 4 or 5 months. I don't know how you tolerate me. It'll be 6 months, 5, 6 months. It'll sit with me, and then I'll get it. And when I get it, I got it. It's locked in, and everything becomes that. Like when we start talking about Gnosticism, like everything is Gnosticism. It's my cage stage
for a little bit. Yeah.
Unplug Knox for real. And so when we talked about a demonic possessed culture, I remember having that conversation, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. I remember there was a process. The process was erotica, an erotic that leads to a violence that leads to was erotica leads to violence that leads to murder, right? Or demon possession. What was it?
First is the dislodgement, right? So it starts with the dislodgement, because which leaves us open to it's the emptiness of the emptiness of either our connections to reality, or just the emptiness that comes from dislodgement from reality. And then what it started with Soren Kierkegaard trying to explain what he was seeing, with modernism coming along, and the dislodgement from the old cosmos, right? So Soren Kierkegaard is post-Enlightenment Christian philosopher, thinker, who sees that we're no longer really connected to the cosmos anymore, right? That we no longer believe that there's this, we no longer believe or take at face value the interconnectedness of the cosmos as a single unit. And so that led to an experience of dislodgement, an experience of emptiness, that the world was empty, the heavens were empty, and therefore when we looked inside, we found emptiness. He said at the same time, you see that there's this rise in spiritual eroticism, or like a religious eroticism. So it's not that there wasn't eroticism before, but what had happened was, with Christianity, you have the sexuality is moved from its position in the old world, where it was either a way to prove your power, right? It was a domination sort of thing when it came to the way that we dealt with one another, or it was a legal way of making kids. So often in the ancient world, you had men were expected, or women were expected to not be promiscuous at all, because their womb was connected to house money, right? What the money from the house went to the children that came from the womb of the wife, right? And so the womb was an economic, was a financial thing, right? Which is still true, but
I
that's
was gonna
not
say, like,
all. That's not
I think
all
that's
that it is,
yeah,
right?
right. It's more than that.
It's more than that, right? So but men weren't expected to be to not be promiscuous, because they could throw their seed anywhere and it didn't have financial repercussions in the ancient world, right?
Except that wasn't true at all.
Well, it could have financial repercussions for if it was somebody else's wife, right? But as long as it was a prostitute, another man, anything, there were all sorts of there wasn't this expectation, right? Promiscuity, you read something like you read the Odyssey, and you simultaneously have you have Odysseus. He's basically sleeping his way across the ancient world. He's sleeping with all sorts of women all along, and decrying the fact, well, once he comes to the conviction, he decries the fact that he's not at home with his wife. But that doesn't keep him sexually faithful, even though he's the hero and he's got the right intuition. I should be home with my wife. That would be better. It doesn't keep him from sleeping with goddesses and princesses he finds on islands, and but those two things aren't opposed to one another, right? What you do sexually is not considered what a man does sexually is not wrapped up in his marital faithfulness in the ancient world. Well, what happens is when Christianity comes along, it simultaneously begins limiting, it tamps down men, and it says, no, that actually is faithlessness, right? What you do with your body, what you do with you sexually, is a part of your marital faithfulness and becomes part of your vows and all that. Not just for women, because there's still a financial aspect, but it becomes much more than a financial arrangement, right? And so because it becomes an allegory of the deepest reality, so it becomes sexuality, but the husbands and the sex life of a husband and wife come to be understood for what it always has been, which is an allegory for God's relationship with his people. So Christ and the church is the central becomes the central image of the sexual relationship between a husband and a wife. Now it is it's an allegory that works. It's not. They understood that you've got this, that we are a part of the poetry, right? So what happens though is so sexuality is elevated to an allegorical understanding of divine reality. Take the divinity out, and now you have what Kierkegaard calls the spirit of the sexual erotic, or the genius. And we've talked about this before. The older understanding of genius is that it's a spirit, right? Not when we say genius, we tend to think that guy's got a big brain, right? The older understanding of genius was like a genie in a bottle, that there's a spiritual entity that is empowering you or possessing you. And so
extra human, huh?
Extra human. Yeah, exactly. So Kierkegaard, he sees the stripping away of the integrated cosmos, after you have, which has elevated sexuality to this understanding of an allegory of the divine. you strip away the cosmos that justifies that, but you keep the understanding of sexuality as something that has elevated to the divine. And he says what you end up with is this spirit of erotic genius. This erotic genius is what he calls it. This spirit of eroticism that always leads, that whose end is violence. So he sees this and he points it out, but he just was like, and there it is. I don't know, and so he says, what do you do with it? Right. Because you've got, it produces, on the one hand, it will produce something incredible, some kind of incredible artistic feat, right? Like Don Giovanni, Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, this incredible musical artwork that's inspired, this musical storytelling that's inspired by this, what he calls the erotic genius, the spirit of eroticism. He says, but then it turns on itself, right? But it has a self-destructive end. So it always has a self-destructive end to it, because it's the self turning in on itself for its ultimate fulfillment.
For itself.
For itself.
Turning into itself for itself.
On itself for itself. Right. And he said that when the self turns in on itself in a cosmos in which the self is an allegory of something else or of someone else, right? It's the self is an allegory of God, which is what Calvin talks about this at the opening of his Institutes, where the selfhood, the self being an allegory, as made in the image of God, an allegory of the divine, that has a place. So to turn in on yourself and inspect yourself is to look away from yourself in an integrated cosmos that is an allegorical cosmos. To take the self out of that integrated allegorical cosmos and then turn in on yourself is the thing that Kierkegaard is saying, look out, world. This is not going to go well. But he sees it so far in advance that a lot of even Christians in the day didn't know what to do with what Kierkegaard was talking about. So he had a vision. He had a vision at right at the turning point of the Enlightenment. He saw modernism.
So when is Kierkegaard?
1800, late 17, early 1800s is his life. I can give you his exact dates.
No. Yeah, that's fine.
So he's at the tail end of the Enlightenment, right? So you've got the scientific revolution, and Kierkegaard is this brilliant Dutch philosopher who sees the effect. He sees the deadening of the church that happens with the shift in the cosmological understanding, and is investigating it philosophically, right? He doesn't always give, sometimes the answers that he gives aren't straight up great,
right.
Because but he's the one who basically sounds the alarm. He's kind of the canary in the coal mine, who's like, uh-oh, we're all dying, and falls over. And you go, oh, he's onto something. His attempts to come up with an answer, he didn't always get the answer correct, although he said it was in the Word of God, right? He said that it becomes the experience of God, the experience of God in the Word of God. He said, I know that's where the answer lies. But his attempts at fleshing that out didn't always, sometimes they just didn't make sense, honestly. It might be because he's writing in Dutch and it's in translation and all that, and I might not be understanding him. But when I read Kierkegaard, there are times when when I think he understands that the restoration of humanity in terms of the relodging of humanity into reality has to begin with a direct experience of God in the Word of God. But then his explanations of how that ends up working itself out, sometimes I think it just comes down to he thinks about it in he doesn't always work it out in the conceptual Trinitarianism, right? So, but I mean, he's the first one to do it. So he was a gift to the church, to get the questions right.
This is before we get Darwinism, right?
Yes. So there probably is some overlapping dates. Let me get the dates exactly right.
But you know, when you start talking about the canary in the coal mine, like, I don't know if everybody knows. Of course, my dad was a coal miner, and so the canary was the one who would and understand the environment, the oxygen. The canary goes, you can expect that you're probably going to go too, right? So it was like their oxygen or carbon dioxide detector.
Right. So Kierkegaard was 1813 to 1855. So he's early 19th century. Darwin's on the Beagle in 1936. So I think 1936 is when he lands on that island and sees the finches, the different length of the finches' beaks. And so it probably published Origin of Species right around the time Kierkegaard was dying. So Kierkegaard saw in advance because he understood the cosmological dislodgement. And one of the things that he says that is,
you mean 1835, right?
1813 to 1855.
But I mean,
yeah,
Darwin.
So, what did I say? Did I say
19?
1935?
Yeah, I was like,
sorry,
1935.
I think it's 1835, 1836. Yeah. He's on the Beagle, and so he ends up publishing on the Origin of Species. Yeah, so he was writing on the Origin of Species when Kierkegaard died, but Kierkegaard saw in advance. So Kierkegaard, he's often called the father of existentialism, which is not. It's not false, but it's actually not the most important thing about him. It was the influence he had was a lot of the later existentialists saw that he was right to point out the cosmological dislodgement. Kierkegaard said, but the response is to draw near to God in his word. Right. That's that there's a way out of the cosmological dislodgement by drawing near to God and his word.
So Jason, the
later existentialists all said there is no solution.
So what define existentialism for me? What is existentialism?
Existentialism is the study. It's the study of existence, but the existentialist movement was a post-Enlightenment. It was the study of existence. Once you understand that we aren't the image of God, right? So
interesting. Okay.
So you get existentialism because you have the cosmos shifting, the understanding of the cosmos shifting, right? If this place isn't, if Darwinism is true, if this place is self-formed by the laws of nature, then what does it mean to be human in that setting? And the existentialists all said there is no ultimate meaning in a self-formed universe that in which we are created by the universe, by the laws of nature. There is no ultimate meaning. If there is no ultimate meaning, how do we account for our existence?
Okay.
Right. So Kierkegaard is the one who says, if we have been, this new understanding of the cosmos has no place for us as the image of God. Right. So Kierkegaard was the one who sounded the alarm that all the cosmological shifting is is causing dislodgement, is causing the dislodgement of the self, right? There's no place for selfhood if the universe has created itself, and we're just a part of the self creation of the universe by the laws of nature.
Does this get to the same thing, like where you get to Romans 1 and you get to idolatry, where men become like their idols, they become what they worship? And so when you remove the image of God from the equation and you start focusing on the created things rather than the creator, then you start, of course you're going to feel some sort of dislodgement, because you're like, that doesn't make sense. I'm not imaging the thing I'm supposed to be imaging. So you get this kind of, right? This is what the feedback loop is inescapable, right?
Right. So, I mean, the psalmist says that the idolater worships the work of his own hands, right? And so he says, so it's so real. So idolatry is always some form of self-worship. What happens post-enlightenment is that you even take the wooden statue out of the equation and you just worship your own hands, right? So there's not even, so the loop of idolatry is shrunk, right? So you just turn in on yourself. So at least
who made the idol?
Idolatry. Yeah, exactly. Right. At least in ancient idolatry, there was a loop in which you look out of yourself, even though it's coming from your own hands, right? So existentialism is the acknowledgement that all that you've got left is the experience of your own selfhood. And so you turn in on yourself, and yourself doesn't even point you away from yourself anymore, right? So it's a recipe for all of the it's the reason that we were susceptible to all the forms of nationalism, fascism, communism, all of the things that said
all the isms,
let me give you, because everybody was looking for something that pulled their eyes away from their own self, in which it was despair and darkness, right? So you're susceptible to the isms when your self is empty, because you've been, everything you try and fill it with, you devour and destroy, right? Okay. And so you see this with sexuality, and this erotic genius, or the spirit of eroticism, this erotic demoniac. He calls it the erotic demoniac. That we become this erotic demoniac, right? Because you have you turn in on yourself, look to yourself for ultimate meaning, and the one time that you feel connected to reality is in the sexual act. And so it becomes whatever it takes to get that feeling of connection that in the sexual act you are willing to do, because the circle is no bigger than yourself, right? So but the problem is, being made in the image of God, even the circle that only involves ourself is designed to take in the infinite fellowship of God.
Okay. Wait. Because as you were talking earlier, and you start talking about, this is why the Lord's Supper and baptism are so important. Like, this is sacraments. This is why God gave us sacraments. Right? Because go ahead.
God didn't make us for the sacraments, right? The sacraments are made for us. We're the kind of creature that need the external covenant markers, right? To pull us out of ourself, because otherwise we'll turn in on ourselves, right? We'll become, when we talk about faith, people that inspect faith rather than have it, right? We'll turn in and we'll become faith-focused people rather than focused by faith. We'll become focused on faith, right? On our own.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's the kind of people we are.
Fruit inspection.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I don't want to miss whatever you got there, but I want to add something to this because the whole reason we're having this conversation now, I know you've been trying to talk so you don't have to deal with this, but I'm gonna bring it in. The whole reason we've been having this conversation,
this stuff makes me so
he's like, is because I saw this clip. Now, these are 5 men who are dressed up as women, makeup, hair, everything. They're trying to disguise themselves as women. They're blackface for women. And they start having a conversation about cultural appropriation. And I saw play the clip, and then I'm gonna respond to it afterwards.
Okay.
Can you hear that?
Did
you hear it when it was playing?
No.
You didn't hear that?
I didn't hear that, no.
Okay, let me see if I can get the audio right. Look, God might be doing a thing for you, Jason. He might be a thing for you. Because so the reason I don't know why you're not hearing it.
No, I can't hear it.
Oh, I'm gonna try and add it back in here. God might be coming through for you, Jason. Might be coming through for you.
He does that a lot.
He's like, no, you don't get it today. Here it goes. Maybe this is it. All right.
Yeah, I just feel like there's such.
You can hear it now? Okay.
I can hear it now.
All right.
Citing the source material. Yeah, I just think there's such a long-rooted history in appropriation from Black culture. Like, for instance, like when I go to the Metropolitan Museum and I see things that they've taken from Africa, I see things that they've taken from Nubia, and then you go and you go and you look at these pillars, and then there's this white man, Samuel something 1800, going and saying, I'm putting my ownership on something that was never mine to begin with. And then they go, yeah, I discovered it. So then it gives me this ownership, like I can take it and it can be mine. And I feel like it's that entitlement that is one thing that we really need to discuss. Like there is a way I feel to very much so appreciate somebody's culture, but so many times, like Bob says, there are times where, you know, they cite the source, but they don't.
That's the weirdest thing. Do they not see?
Well, that's the thing. Okay, so again, so when I saw this clip, all I could think about was, okay, so this is obvious. Like this is obvious. It's clear that there's a contradiction here, and everyone sees it, even them. They see, everybody sees it, and everybody's going to respond to the things that are seen here and point out those individual things. Like, okay, these are men who are dressed like women, who are talking about white folks appropriating a culture that's not theirs. Men appropriating women who they are not or can never be. White folks might actually be able to be in Black culture and be a part of it and engage in it. That's way more reality. You know how many white folks I grew up inside of Black culture? That's a reality. They can never be a part of the reality that they're trying to fake. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, I saw Kevin Bacon in the air up there. I remember.
White man can jump. They proved it in the movie. You know what I'm saying? So talk about a dated reference for 900.
I know. That was so bad.
Yeah, but people understand me. And if you ain't seen White Man Can't Jump, then you need to go watch it. Doggone it.
Right.
It's a classic. But when I saw this, I realized there's no argument that I can, since it's so obvious, it's so clear, there's no argument that I can make that will be effective against this type of situation. This is demonic.
Right.
This right here goes beyond a logical form of argumentation to try and prove something wrong. This is something that has to be purely cast out. There, you don't have a debate with this. You know what I mean? You don't make up your best logical argument to try and convince these people that they are wrong. There is no verbal argumentation on this. This is a problem inside of culture that has a genie in it, right? This is demonic. This is possession. And so I saw this 3 weeks ago, and I was like, how do we are, I can't make, and this is not the only area. I can see it in so many different areas. I see it in some of the politics that we're having. I see it in the whole trans movement. I see it in the home. I see it in the same thing with women and pastors. It's everywhere. Just recently, the shooting that happened in Tennessee, just yesterday, right? Yeah, you have
so tragic.
So there was a couple of things. This is super tragic. There was a couple of things though. Immediately, I thought about was like, when our women are going into schools and shooting them up, because the first message out was, this is a woman who has gone, a 28-year-old woman who used to be a student at the school, went inside and shot up killed six people, three children who were 9 and 3 adults. And I was like, man, the fact that our women now, this one was different than some of the other ones because a woman was going in here and killing. So there's the nature of a woman has been completely removed, and God has given us over in some way that is different than before, because that's different. And then when I realized that they said that this person was identifying as a man, as trans, I was like, oh, this is, while it's still a woman and we have a problem here, it's a different type of problem, because a woman who is still functioning as a woman doing this means one thing. A woman who has given up her uterus and decided to become a man gives us a whole different kind of problem, right? We got perversion on 2 different levels, but they're not the exact same. There is, and so I just remember us having the conversation of a demon-possessed culture, and I'm like, yo, how do we get here? And then what do we do to get out of this? Because part of me, Jason, is thinking, you're going to have to let this run its course. You're going to have to be somewhat under the judgment of God while you stay faithful, and this whole thing goes insane, right? Like there's a part of me that feels like that. And I'm not trying to say like give up and move out and don't engage, but when you're under the judgment of God, we've talked about this before, you don't escape that as a nation. You don't escape the judgment of God. There's always like Egypt was under the judgment of God. God's people were in the midst of it, and they had their lights on while Egypt didn't have any lights, right? So you can be under the judgment of God and protected at the exact same time. And I think some Christians forget that.
Right.
But so that's one aspect of this for me. And there's another aspect where I'm like, grab the holy water, grab the holy oil, grab my people who speak in tongues, and to my I don't care, get them, and we can all go out and figure out how to cast out these demons, because we got some demons. You know what I mean? Yeah. I want my charismatic folks to come through and start speaking in tongues and laying on some hands, and let's get these demons going. But when we're dealing with a demon-possessed culture, I feel it's a different situation. And so I guess, so we got from existentialism, being dislodged, brings us to this eroticism. And now that eroticism that you were talking about brings us to what?
Well, first, I think it's important that we realize that the reason we're here is because we tried to clean the house without Jesus. Right? So the psychology,
you think we had a demon?
We had a demon.
Okay.
We cleaned the house, and now we got 7.
When do we clean the house? So, like, what would be your marker? Like, man, we actually tried to clean the house at this point.
I think the entire psychotherapy movement. So psychology means the study of the soul. The psyche is the soul, and its attempt to put the soul right, because it grows up because the soul gets crackly and broken. And psyche, I believe the Greek word is butterfly, but it also means soul, which I think there's something to that. But you start getting conversations about soul sickness. uh, in this, in the late 18, but really the early 1900s, right? Something's wrong with the soul of America. Something's wrong with the soul of mankind. And it's so you've got Freud is kind of the main figure. But you've also got Carl Jung. You've got all these different psychologists.
Wait, Carl Jung too?
Carl Jung. So he was a student of Freud. They have all these
I remember we talked about that.
Yeah, all these discussions about the soul and the brokenness of the soul and how we're going to fix the soul. And they and you've a huge explosive movement, and at the heart. So when we talk about this is something that we often miss because of the way we tell the story about all of the mainline denominations going wrong. The mainline, because the fight was theological, but the evidence of which churches went with the modernist movements, that they were the ones that were preaching psychology, right? So they weren't going out and preaching heresy straightforwardly in the mainline denominations, right? In what became the United Methodist Church, what became the PCUSA, what became the Lutheran, the mainline Lutheran churches, right? They weren't preaching heresy directly. They were preaching psychology. And it's because psychology was going to put right what was broken.
The soul.
Right? The soul. And they understood that the soul was broken. And we tend to think of psychology now as fixing the mind. And so we call it mental health. We call it all that, which, and the mind can have a problem, and the brain can have problems. But it was more honest to say this is a soul problem. The soul, scripturally speaking, is the point of integration for the whole human, right? When you talk about the soul, we're talking about the integrated human, body and spirit together is integrated in soul. It's a misnomer to talk about the soul. In my understanding, it's a misnomer to talk about the soul living on after death. It's the spirit that lives on and then is reunited with the body, right? So the body and the spirit are divided, and the spirit exists. The soul is the integrated body spirit of mankind, right? So the disintegration, or the lack of integration of the human being, begins to be studied with science, saying science will put this right. And it really, up until you get to B.F. Skinner, who was he used to say that so B.F. Skinner was a pure materialist, that if you are just responding to whatever your impulses are just simple responses to what came in. So when you were a kid, you were treated this way, this happened, and so now you are responding, right? So we're purely a cause and effect materialism. And he created this, what they called the Skinner box, where you would put people in them and you would reset you would put them through childhood again. You would reset all of their inputs, all of the causes, so that to get new effects. So if somebody was having a hard time integrating with society, then you would take them away from society and rebuild them and it got so weird sometimes that they would like reforce people through a birth canal, like
artists do this stuff now to try and say that we're rebirthing ourselves, and this is an experience,
right? So but you think about it,
Prisons do this.
It's the problem is not that you don't need a rebirth. That they're right. The problem is trying to give them one through science. We need a rebirth from the Holy Spirit, right? We're told that the problem is our original birth and that rebirth is the solution. But
wow.
they're trying to do it with science, and and that's going to put the soul right. When that fails, everybody turns to drugs. So it's not like drugs show up. I don't know if you saw the new Jesus Revolution. It's quite well done. One of the things that was the new Jesus Revolution movie.
I haven't seen it yet. We had Joel on. I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So it's very well done. One of the things that I think is great is they show Timothy Leary as the evangelist that he was, right? He's going around preaching we can fix things through drugs. That's because they had just failed fixing things through psychotherapy, right? Because they said, well, it turns out it's not just input output as the problem, but it's actually a chemical problem. We need to we need a chemical rebirth, and LSD is going to do that, or antidepressants are going to do that, or whatever it is.
C.S. Lewis was onto this. C.S. Lewis
he was onto all of it, right? So this is he's the one that I learned to look for all of this stuff from, right? So you've got this attempt to clean the house through psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, without Jesus. And this is why what's so hard is there are people that are helped by psychiatry, and that's not a problem, right? Because and often they mislabel what the help was, right? Because have you seen the new Shrinking? I just started it, so yes. I don't know if it's good or not, but I just started it. What's crazy is what my wife and I have been saying for a long time is, a counselor can be really helpful, but really they're just a professional friend.
That's right.
Right. And that's not a problem, right? We might need that right now to get through this particular phase of things. But Shrinking, the new Apple TV show, that's what this counselor realizes, like, what these people actually need is a friend, and I'm not helping them at all. And so he starts actually becoming friends with his patients, and it helps a bunch of them. But it means that he has to start helping them carry their problems. And so it's also causing him problems, but it's also helping put some of his stuff right. And you've got the old school counselor, who played by
Harrison Ford.
And he's brilliant. He does a really good job of playing like the old line counselor who's like, if you care about your patients, you'll be useless. You gotta not care. You gotta stay objective, right? And it's really funny. But it's showing that it's usually the human connection that actually helps people, right? The human connection with the counselor. It's not generally the method. Sometimes it's like they don't have life skills because they didn't get them growing up, and a friend gives them life skills and they pay their friend for it, right? That's counseling. And so some people can be helped, but if you clean the house and you don't then come in with the Holy Spirit, you end up with 7 demons, and that's where we're at, right? You look around and you're
that show proves that too. Shrinkage proves that too. Like every time he fixes a problem, right?
I haven't gotten very far. I just watched the pilot last night.
The first episode proves that though, as he's fixing the problem.
You're right.
Right? He goes to that soccer game and he makes it worse, but now he makes it worse for everybody. It's not just worse for the guy who had the problem. It's worse for the person who was another person who was counseling, and his own daughter, and him, and and so you got
people are in jail and all sorts of stuff.
You're right. Yeah.
Right. I'm curious where that show's going to go, because
me too.
The setup, but I haven't. I mean, they just started it.
So you mark the that we were trying to do something then with the whole go ahead.
Right. So I think you've got basically like 1900 really through about 19 1940, 1950, you've got the first cleansing of the house through psychology. And all of the mainline denominations fell to the worldliness of psychology. It affected their theology, and there was heresy involved and all sorts of things. But what they were saying is, no, but this actually is helping people. What you're doing is not helping people. Because the attempts to preach the gospel in that era, you have the rise of dispensationalism, which is where you buy into the broken down cosmology, but still try and preach the book of Revelation, right? Like how do you interpret the book of Revelation in the new modernist cosmology? You get dispensationalism. So, but it's a retreatist. That's why you get a retreatist cosmology, or a retreatist movement in dispensationalism, right? The church was never a retreatist institution. It was a converting institution. But
it was the antidote, right?
It was the antidote, right? It came in and said, let's put this garden right. If you no longer view the universe as a united whole, right? If you no longer view this place as a garden, as a broken down garden waiting for a gardener, but you want to hold on to Jesus saves us, then he saves us from this place, not to this place. And dispensationalism is a version of a Christian version that fits with the false cosmology of modernism.
I'm looking up as you're talking. I probably don't need to think about the first one. What was I'm going to find this real quick because I think you're right. So look at the early 1900s all the way. I would move your markers all the way to the civil rights movement. I think there was a lot of cleaning that was going on in America that happened from 1900s to that give it 65, 67 years, 69 years, right? There's that time period where there's a lot of things where we couldn't even imagine the world as it was in that old nature, just in the Jim Crow laws. Yeah. We have no recollection of that, really. I mean, not in a true form, but I think it was at least when school shootings started, that was the Columbine, the one that I really remember. Yeah. Columbine was kind of the one that set it off. We had some mass shootings before that we've kind of cleaned, but Columbine was different. Columbine was the Gothic kind of, underground, picked on kids rising up and terrorizing their classmates. And then, it was like, okay, Columbine happened. And then a few after that, but now it feels way more common, and it could be the technology that we have, maybe, but I think they're happening more than they used to, and it's almost as if we're waiting for the next one, right? We're waiting for the next school shooting, we're waiting for the next mass shooting. Like, we are at a place now where things have ramped up much higher than they used to be in the 80s and in the 90s. And things are becoming more complex, and it's happening where we're getting used to turning on our phones or getting a notification say, oh, there's another one. It's almost like it's like we're getting seared to it. And so I think you're right. I don't think it's an accident that they're happening more. And it's not access to guns. It's not access to knives. It's not. There is something else in our culture that has this type of demonic possession that's acting itself out. And it happens to be happening right along the men turning into women, women turning into men,
Yes.
LGBTQ stuff, you know, all this stuff is kind of. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, so if you remember the end of what they said was going to be a sexual revolution, right, was Kent State. So you had the Texas Arlington shooting like 66, and then you had Kent State in 1970, and it basically ended that era. It was, you had people saying, hey, we're going to have a sexual revolution. It was a failed sexual revolution, right? If you look at the actual statistics, right? But what happened was a lot of those folks that tried to do the tried to accomplish the sexual revolution went into education, right? And so they ended up finally accomplishing the sexual revolution in the 90s. That's when you get the turn in actual statistics. You get the turn away from marriage. You get the and I think Columbine is evidence of the and then Columbine beginning all of the school shootings and having it kind of ramping is the evidence that the sexual revolution actually worked this time around. Whereas Kent State ended their first attempt, right? After that, everyone was like, whoa, 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 where's this all going? This isn't okay. And I mean, you have you also have the attempt to use medication to keep kids in line, right? You've got that really takes off, right? So but the old ways of controlling people just they weren't working. You had little pockets of sexual revolution, right? You have the Bauhaus movement, which is like a school of architecture / trans movement. That's the weirdest thing, but it's like and that's coming out of Germany. It lands in America and spreads throughout all of the universities. You have little pockets here and there, but you really don't. You've got some of that in the New York art scene in the late in the 70s. But you don't really get a mass movement, a mass sexual revolution until you get to the 90s, and it leads to violence, right? It's that dislodgement of a generation, not just the artists of a generation, which we'd seen before, where you saw that in the 60s and the 70s. The artists of the generation keenly felt the dislodgement and acted on it. But you don't have a whole generation until the 90s, statistically speaking.
So then, okay, I think I can follow those patterns as you're talking. I'm making those patterns. I'm following those patterns. A culture has I mean, this is what was so crazy. Last time we talked about this, Walker Percy's Lost in the Cop. You've made me read this. Thank you. I need to read it more. But it keeps coming back into chapter 18, the demonic self.
The demoniac self.
Demoniac, thank you, demoniac self. So there's a process, though, that he goes through, that you've been going through: dislodgement, eroticism. What's after eroticism?
Violence.
Violence. Oh, my goodness. Violence. The riots, right? You know, you got the LA riots that happen out, and you start seeing that happen far more. And then, okay, so you got riots from violence. So you got violence. So first, dislodgement, eroticism, violence, and then what? So that's the end of the process is violence.
Well, it's a repetition, right? So you in the violence, either by the fear or the pain, you feel reconnected, right? And then
so it's trying to do the same thing that eroticism does. Connect you back to reality.
Connect you back to reality, right? And so when the eroticism fails, it bursts into violence, and then the violence reconnects you, right? So I mean, there's a reason that we show it over and over and over and over, and right, that because and people will come back and watch it over and over because you feel you feel something again, right? You feel reconnected in the process.
So I got to say something here, because during the pandemic, I thought that people were going to go absolutely bonkers with pornography. I just was like, oh my goodness, pornography is going to go through the roof. And so as soon as the pandemic hit, it really did. It started to go crazy. And within the month, or within a couple weeks even, people stopped engaging in pornography. And I was like, well, that's weird. And started looking at the stats, and it's like, oh, they weren't. And then right after pornography, you get the riots. Almost every city is burning, right? Like, it didn't satisfy. They went and they engaged in so much pornography, they got their fill of it, and then they went numb again. The culture just went numb again, and then violence broke out all over America in every major city.
And everybody said, well, we got to just let it happen. And there were different groups that had different reasons for that, right? Because you had the people that it's like the opening of John Wick, right? Where the new one, when he comes in and he lights the fire, Lawrence Fishburne. Did you notice the shape of the fire? It was a house.
No.
Right. He comes in and he lights, and there's a giant gasoline house on the floor, and he lights it, and they pan up and you see the house is burning. Right. And you realize, oh, and John Wick is standing at the base of it, punching. He's standing punching at the foundation where the house is, and it's all on fire. It's really and you realize this is what's happening. We're gonna go burn down the house.
Spoiler alerts! Spoiler alerts! I'm just gonna say that real quick.
I'm not spoiling it. They made it clear from the opening scene. Yes. Oh yeah. Okay. I might spoil it too, but from the opening scene, they made it clear that this is a cosmic battle, and which is going to be the burning down of a cosmic house of some sort. Just
reality.
With that,
that's a really good point.
Right? And so that's what, and they frame the entire story with that image, right? With that opening image. You don't come back to it ever, but you come back to Lawrence Fishburne, who gets the last word. He gets the opening, he gets the first word, he gets the last word. Brilliant writing. And so that you understand this is a cosmic battle going on. And so every detail you should put into that perspective. They know, if they know what they're doing, which I think they did. I mean, all the way down to, the number of steps he had to climb twice and all that.
Wait, what? Okay, we're gonna have to talk about that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this movie again, because you haven't seen it twice. So I need to go back and watch it again so we can have this conversation.
We gotta watch it together
twice. Yeah, we do. Okay, so
do you remember how many steps it was?
Okay, I don't. 7. Right?
There's 222.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh yeah. 200. Oh yeah. Why 222?
I mean, I know my take on why it's 222 and why he has to do it twice.
Oh, you got to tell me. You got to tell me. 222 twice. 444.
So yes, so it's 222 and then 444. But he gets to the bottom of the steps, and they say, and now he must climb 222 steps to get to the sunrise, right? And then he makes it, and then he goes back down, and then he makes it again, right? So it ends up being 444 steps to get to the sunrise. So first off, just having to climb to the top in order to have the final battle to bring down the people at the top, which is what this is all about, right? Is the resetting of the resetting of the world. I mean, literally, it's the resetting of the world. That's what he's there to do, in a literary sense, right? Because he starts there with the burning down of the house. They're everywhere he touches, they're blowing up and they're melting down the entire world just to get to him. And it's because of the people at the top that the world is actually on fire. And so he has to go in and remove the people at the top at sunrise. And so, so 2 is the number of separation. I mean, get real crazy, but it always is, right? And so
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Okay.
Separation, right? If you got 1, everything's unified. You got 2, everything's everything's.
You
separate,
can see that in
right?
creation. God makes something, he breaks
creation.
it.
The second day you've got is the day of separation.
Adam, Eve, right? Yeah,
exactly. So you get and so it makes conflict possible, but it also makes restoration possible, right? And he's at the bottom, and you've got the other guys at the top, and he's trying to get up there in order to finish the burning down of the house, right? Think of how many people John Wick kills along the way. Right? He's burning down the world, the fantasy world that they've created, wherein you've got all these different assassins, right, that are just everywhere, right? You get to the end of that movie, that world is gone, right? They're having to reset everything. They've burned down and destroyed 2 of the major, two of the major, the hotels, that obviously took years to put together. You've got the one of the houses is gone. Did you stay for the after credit scene?
There's an after credit scene.
Oh yeah, there's an after credit scene that I think is really important to understanding the whole thing as well.
You can tell it to me. I'm going to see it again anyway.
So it's spoiler alert. If you didn't know, we've been spoiling it, but it's the daughter from the Osaka hotel.
Yeah.
You've got Kane, who's got flowers, walking to go reintroduce himself to his daughter who's playing violin. And the daughter of the Osaka hotel is sneaking up on him with a knife. Right. And so right before she jumps him, it cuts. So we don't know what happens. But the last thing that she said was, or the last thing he said is, "I'll see you coming." Right. Now he's blind. And so there's some irony to the statement, but you can't tell if he sees her coming or not, but you know that he has said he will see her coming. And so you have to assume to see her coming, but she is the end of the Osaka, the house of Osaka, right? She's the only one left. And so if she dies, the house of Osaka is done. She's not married. So there's no heir to the house of Osaka yet. it shows, I think, that they understand, well, one, without that, then you've just got this weird thread hanging out there that's incomplete. But once you add that in, it actually ties off the last bit, the last question that they raised in the first act, which it, or by the midpoint, the last question that they've raised was the Kane House of Osaka conflict, which is now out there. So you have this, but you have John Wick going from, so he goes down all the way to the sewers underneath the city, all the way to the peak where the sun is coming up at the top of the city, where the church is. Yeah. So, yep. And I knew well, and do you remember when they get to the top of the steps, what happens to him?
Get cut in the hand, pierced his hand. Yeah,
he gets the pierced hand to start it all off. Yep. So he has to shoot left-handed. So we've got the pierced hand, and then the last wound he gets is the pierced side. So he goes all the way through from the bowels of the earth all the way up to the top, and has to climb the 222 steps to get there. And then he's thrown down and has to climb them again in order to get to the sunrise. So the oh,
you already said kind of crazy. Just go for
it. Right. And the number 4 is the number of the sun, the moon, and the stars. And he's there to tear down the sun, the moon, and the stars. And this is embedded into reality. This is not because the Bible says it, right? So you get this in all the great literature of the ancient world, so that the meaning of numbers.
This is where the Quadrivium, that book that I got, really helped me work through this. And Sun, Moon, Stars,
so
that book too.
So the meaning of numbers.
Is that the book that you read? You were going for that?
Yeah, that's the book I was going for. Yeah. So the meaning of numbers is not something that we impose onto because the world is actually an integrated whole. The meaning of numbers is not something we impose onto them. It's something that is within them, right? And so all the great storytellers and storytelling, and just the way that great stories end up formed, this numeric meaning is there, right? So this is, it's the meaning. You have to know this stuff even to build great buildings and great architecture. This is why I hate the metric system, right? Because it's an attempt to impose without the cosmological numbers, right? It's an attempt to impose a measurement system that ignores the cosmological meaning of numbers. And I think that's why the communists invented the metric system, because they hate the cosmos.
We say the metric system does?
The metric system, yeah.
That's all I know, Jason.
No, inches and feet and all that, right? The metric system is centimeters and meters, and it's evil.
No, no, right.
Unless you're measuring hell, don't use the metric system. That's what I say. It's because all of our geometric numbers, which is what the numbers we the numeric systems are all derived from geometry. They take into account that these numbers are not something that the numbers and the intervals and everything are not something that we impose. It's something that we learned from the world. So if you say there's 360 degrees in a circle, that's because of the number of sunrises, the number of movements from sunrise to sunrise it would take to get all the way around if the sun just kept going in a circle, right? So
We've
you've got
talked about that,
360
yeah.
degrees in a circle. So these are not numbers. The meaning of numbers is something we discover, right? There's an embedded meaning within numbers that works its way out in great stories, right? So so it's not even something that the author needs to be aware of. It's reality that has these meanings.
In the same way that he uses gravity, he can't help but use.
You can't help
right,
but use. Yeah. So
it's funny.
so,
I was thinking about this today. I'll let you finish. I think about
let me completely
today.
destroy
You know
my
how that you can
reputation.
find almost every good story. It's inescapable. No, I don't think so. I don't think you know what I think it is, Jason? I think we are so illiterate that we don't even understand what you just said, so that we don't even think about numbers in that way, right? The only time we think of it is because Pastor Wilson has talked about this too. We have been trained and taught in fragmented environments instead of a real triune universities. Universities to unify all the sciences together and show how they harmonize and make sense in Christ's world. When you are taught these sciences separate from each other, then you don't understand how they work in an integrated triune world. So the way that we think about numbers, the way that we think about math, the way that we think about even death and resurrection, 360 degrees, sunsets, moon sets, right? The way we think about these things are all separate. They're not unified, which is part of what we've been talking about this whole conversation. When we think about the world like that, then you're going to be dislodged, and dislodged people are not going to see an integrated universe, right? They're going to not without looking inside themselves for it. And so I don't think that this is crazy at all. I think that there is an ignorance to us that pre-enlightenment we had, you know, that medieval mind, this was part of the world that they understood. And so now when you come to, so I want to get to what you mean by so now we got fours. So you got fours. What is the four supposed to represent in the way, because I want you to finish because that's what we were.
Yeah. So fours are, it's the number, it's an authority number, right? This is why you've got the four thrones in Narnia, right? What the reason you have four thrones in Narnia is because the fourth day is the day that the authority of the sun, the moon, and the stars is established. Heavenly authority is established, and it is all of the authorities that God establishes from then on are symbolized by the fourth day, right? So and so sun, moon, and then stars, you know, which is a plural, adds up to four. All right. So you have this. So if you look at the mentions of the sun, the moon, and the stars throughout the scriptures, most of them are metaphorical, and having to do with the authority structures of the world, right? At the top of the 440, or at the top of the stairs, is the Sacred Heart, right? The city of the Sacred Heart, or I mean the Church of the Sacred Heart in France, right? So you have this 400. He makes it up the steps twice. So you got in order to overthrow the authority of the world at sunrise. So
that last part again. What'd you say?
At sunrise, right? So at the dawn, it's because it's the dawning of a new authority structure.
Wait. You talking about resurrection? You talking about resurrection? is finished. So is that the tomb opening up, Jesus is not there, and then so the sunrise, and is that what you're talking about? Is that where we at? Because I'm trying to put this together. Is that what you're trying to say?
It's the resurrection of a new world, right? A new world is born, but it's born in the death of John Wick. Right. That they're making it clear that this is a cosmic battle, and it's a new world needs to be raised from the ashes. Right? That's how they started. They burn it down. A new world is raised from the ashes, but somebody has to die to get it there. Right. The last thing he says is, "Can you take me home?" The last thing that's said to him by Cain is, so the last thing he says to Cain is, "You owe me," and Cain says, "Yep." The last thing that the guy that runs the New York hotel is, he says, "Can you take me home?" And he says, "Yes." Right. So you've got him. He has become the authority, but he dies by taking it to himself. And so the authority of that old structure. I mean, this is just story structure stuff, right? You start reading like Robert McKee, even, who's not a Christian, talking about story structure. All this stuff comes up. Brian.
You are very uncomfortable right now.
Oh, I know, but because this is fun. This is like fundamental story stuff that good stories all hold. And Brian McDonald talks about a lot of this stuff, but
yeah.
But what most people don't realize is this is because reality functions this way, right? This is you're truly reflecting reality. And so people are like, "Oh, let's put in a Christ figure," right? But you got to get deep foundational story structure stuff to get something that like what they did with John Wick was so good that you start sounding crazy by pointing out how good it is and how fundamental they got the foundations of story, the foundations of reality reflected in the way that they did this. Because all of a sudden you're like, wait, was John Wick Jesus? You're like, no, you don't understand. He's a Christ figure. But what did Jesus do? He harrowed hell. He went to he shook the foundations of the earth. He took all the authority of the house to himself, buried it in the grave, and came out. Right.
New authority.
New authority. Right. When you start talking new heavens and a new earth, this is new heavens and a new earth imagery. And because Christians don't believe their own theology anymore, we don't write stuff like this. I mean, you do every once in a while. You get like Holes, I think, is a really good example of a Christian getting this stuff and writing a story that has that sort of deep imagery. That understands the deep cosmic imagery of the scriptures and takes it into his storytelling. Louis Sachar does in Holes, but you get it in Tolkien. When Aragorn is going to become king, he has to first pass through the paths of the dead, and deal with the ghosts of the past, the ghosts of a previous generation, in the paths of the dead. And you do get this stuff in great literature. You don't get it in movies very often. I mean, I was blown away by the writing of John Wick. And I knew I was going to love it from that opening sequence where you're walking through the bowels of the city. You're walking through Hades, because they set up a three-layered world, and everything. You're walking through with the divine declarations of Lawrence Fishburne's character. Then you get to imagery of the house on fire. You've got the thumping of the foundations, that with the blood of John Wick. Like from the beginning, you're like, because it opens with the shot of the blood of John Wick. You're like, oh, I know where this is going. If they know what they're doing, I know right where this is going, especially once he got stabbed in the hand. You know, as soon as he got pierced in the hand, I was like, oh, they do know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. So once he got pierced in the hand, the second time I watched it, I was like, now I got to find it because it's going to be everywhere.
So I want to take all that you just said about story. Go ahead.
People think you're crazy when you start talking this way, though, just so you know. I've seen it enough times. I start to talk about it.
I don't think so.
No, I mean, I've started to have try to explain this to people before, and have gotten enough responses of like, hey, you're being nuts, and you know, this is your it's like hermeneutical maximalisms, you know, accusations, and like, but it's I mean, this isn't something that I found with James Jordan, right? This is which is what usually people say, like, oh, you're just doing right. This is the study of the classical. This is the study of the classics, the study of classical literature, the study of the great literary minds, right? I mean, so a good example, like Aristotle in his Poetics. So when you talk about he talks about the corporate purgation that comes from storytelling when storytelling reflects reality, right? That you can be corporately purged of the need for violence by a good story. That they understood the cosmic import, that storytelling was a cosmic, had cosmic significance for a culture, for a people, for a community. And what we want, we tend to think of it as a distraction. And even Christians tend to think of it as a distraction, which I think is why we're bad at it. But that's a whole nother thing. That's because we don't even read our own literature that is divine, inspired, perfect literature. We don't even read it like literature.
I think you're working too hard to make your case. We just got done watching a video with 5 guys talking about cultural appropriation, who think that they're women, and you know, all I have to do to people who think like, oh, you're working too hard. It's like, oh, I'm working too hard. Okay. Oh,
but it's a little like trying to translate a different language, though.
Are in their skyrise building or wherever they think they are. I want to take them and I want to point out that we are getting rays from a burning flame of fire up there. See that? That's the sun. It's a burning flame of fire that is giving us rays that we eat. Okay? Just so you know, we eat the sun. Do you get that?
Like,
so when people
one of
get
the
that,
things we're made of is sunlight.
That's right. You know, like, so when people get to say, oh man, that's out of here, I'm like, you think that's crazy? Like, you have no room for an enchanted world, universe. Like, you're missing out. Like, you're really missing the enchantment of the universe because you've been infected by this by the Enlightenment, right? Like, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
So I want to take everything that you just said about story, because I think this is all connected in the poetry of it. And there has to be a way to come through and look at what we're currently at. We haven't even finished talking about the demonic possession of a culture yet. But oh, okay, man. Oh, let me save that question. Because John Wick is known to be so violent, everyone, it is John Wick pointing to the fact also, though, that violence is being fed by films like John Wick. If violence is the end of the dislodgement, eroticism, sexuality, and then violence, isn't John Wick fueling that reality of violence?
Well, what makes it different is that he puts it in the context of it's a cosmic violence, and he says, what do I want to be known for? A loving husband. Right? Violence in and of itself is not a problem.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Violence is a blessing to those behind you when you're protecting them. And he shows that this is
the foot crushing the head of the serpent is violent.
Exactly. Right. So that's what, and I think that's what stands out about this movie. That's why John Wick resonated the way it did. Because you have all the jokes like over a dog, but anybody that's seen it says, no, it's not over a dog. No, what, you didn't see it, did you? That wasn't about a dog. They're like, well, isn't it because they killed his dog? And they're like, yes, but no, because that dog had been imbued with all of the meaning, right? The dog became the tip of the iceberg for all of the meaning of what it means to be a husband, right? John Wick is the anti erotic violence. He's the opposite. It's the opposite of erotic violence. It is the protective violence of a husband who says, no, my house is a place, it's the violence protecting the marriage bed, right? That's what, I mean, I don't know if you've seen all of those pictures of Keanu Reeves when fans come up to try and get a picture with him and he doesn't touch women. Have you seen these pictures? Right, where he puts his arm around them because he's trying to be friendly, and there's always like 2 inches between him and the girl. Right, he puts his arm around guys and he gets pictures, but with a girl he always doesn't touch them. Right, he's very aware of what's going on, and it's
right.
I love that about Keanu Reeves. Like, he's so but I think John Wick is this. It's like a last stand to protect marriage type of movie. I mean, it's really it's very interesting to see, because
you got me.
Violence isn't a problem.
Think that
violence in and of itself isn't a problem.
Fascinating.
It's the use of
we got to go watch it together.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead.
I was saying there was one thing about the steps that I forgot too.
What was that?
Those are the steps of Martyr Mountain. It's the place of the first martyr in France in the 3rd century. I can't remember what year exactly. Middle of the 3rd century. The first martyr in France was honored by putting 222 steps onto the mountain that he was martyred at the top of. So people go there in order to walk up. It's an old pilgrimage site where people walk up those mountains to remember that France was Christianized by the willingness of this martyr. So I think that's also on purpose.
So so I want to
whether it's on purpose from the creator or just from God, it's on purpose.
I want to take the ability that you have with story reading to read a story, to understand the creation and how God tells stories, and I want to take into our current setup that we have right now and look at the current demonic possessed culture that we're in.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of read out like where this goes, where it ends and where it goes, and then kind of what to do with it. Because that video that I played for you, I watched Republicans and I watched conservatives and I watched everybody look for a hot take, and all of them were obvious and clear. I didn't disagree with anybody's hot take, but all of them I felt like are not getting at the root of the problem.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see some people start saying, oh, that's demonic. I'm starting to see a lot more of that, which I'm grateful for, but I don't know if they know how to cast out a demon. So when you got it in your culture, go ahead.
And that I think is the question, that what does it come down to? Is, let's say we come to the realization, oh, we got a demonic problem. And I think we do. Part of it is, if you look at, there's a really great sci-fi novel called The Three Body Problem that opens during the communist revolution in China, and they do a really good job of explaining the way the generation gap was used to inflame the violence of youth, for the purposes of overthrowing the old world government of China and replacing it with a communist regime. So the Three Body Problem does a really good job of showing the process, but part of it is that you have to create a rivalry where I'm right because I'm in the right group. And so that dehumanizes the other group so that it doesn't matter what they say. Right. And there's demons thrive on rivalry. Right. Because lies can exist in a rivalrous scenario that can't, if everybody has good faith towards one another. But in a rivalry, you stop having good faith towards one another. Right. So, that's what you see in this situation. Why is it that they don't care what everybody is saying when they point out the contradiction? Because people that aren't humans can't point out the contradiction, and people on the other side don't get treated like humans anymore. And this goes both directions when you get into a political rivalry, right? So if you've got Democrats that are able to say, I don't have to take them seriously, they're Republicans, and you've got Republicans saying, I don't have to take them seriously, they're Democrats, then we're dealing with a political rivalry that has dehumanized the other side, right? You should have, if a human being comes along and says, hey man, that was you're being self-contradictory, you should stop and say, wait, am I? But if you've already got a culture that has accepted the rivalry, then you're dealing with what you've got to do is be in the right group, not be truthful. Right. So,
okay. So
that's an important thing to remember, because that's how the demons protect themselves. That's how demons keep you from ever getting to the demons.
You get caught up in the rivalry.
You get caught up in the rivalry, right? Why is it that the demoniac out amongst the tombs was protected by the city? Why did the city say, don't mess with that, right? He's a monster. They're afraid of him. They're hiding from him. They don't go out amongst the tombs, it says. Nobody can go out there because they keep trying to chain him up. He breaks the chains, right? But then when Jesus says we want to get rid of him, why is it that the city says, whoa, 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 whoa? Right? The rivalry between between the city and the people in the city and the demoniac makes the people in the city come to the protection of the demon when Jesus wants to get rid of it, or the demons when Jesus wants to get rid of it. They need him to exist because their corporate identity now requires the other side.
Whoa, wait a second. Wait one cotton picking minute here, mister. Are you saying, oh, there's a lot to ask here. Are you saying that the way that our rivalries are currently set up, we are happy when we see a boogeyman to fight?
Yeah. We need those men dressed as women.
Okay, wait, hold on. But there's real wickedness here in the world. That's real wickedness. That's really bad stuff. And we got to deal with this stuff too. And now we didn't make these people, but they're here. So we got to deal with this stuff.
Do you remember the opening of Jesus Revolution?
I didn't see the film.
Oh yeah, you didn't see the film.
I want to.
Oh, they do a really good job with this.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons I really liked it. It opens with Chuck Smith's sermon, dehumanizing the hippies. Right. Saying they're what's wrong with the world.
Well,
right.
Well, I mean, have you seen them?
They do set, and I really like the writing in Jesus Revolution because now there was some theological problems, I think, in the movement. There was something, so this is not the last scene made me super uncomfortable. And when you see it, we'll have to talk about the keys and the way keys are used as a symbol throughout the movie. I think they do it well, but they face the symbolism in the wrong direction with the keys. But because of a theological problem. But what you have is right now, most churches wouldn't know what to do with a homosexual that walked through the front door, because they have most conservative Christians have set up a rivalry that is based in corporate justification, meaning we are the right group of people, right? We're the justified group of people. We're corporately justified as a group because we're not them.
This is why you see people fall apart when you start talking about God or the gospel actually saving pedophiles. When you see the gospel saving those people and those people, right? That there's a breakdown.
Yeah, that because our corporate justification is by works, by avoidance, right? So remember, the doctrines of demons all have to do with avoidance, right? If a demon gets into the pulpit, he starts preaching about what to avoid. That doesn't mean that there's not things we're supposed to avoid, but we have the same reason that you avoid erotic violence, right? We shouldn't get involved with erotic violence, but that's because there's a good thing to protect, right? There's a good thing to do. The avoidance isn't in itself a justifying act, right? The corporate, and we understand that usually with, well, it's gotten shakier and shakier even in personal justification, but in corporate justification, we don't get this at all. Justification is always by faith, whether it's individual, whether it's corporate, right? It's Jesus. It's faith in Jesus that justifies whatever kind of justification the church has. And corporate we want to be in the right. We want to be a group of people. We want to be a corporate group that are in the right. But that's by faith, because of what Jesus has done only. And because we don't think in terms of corporate justification, because we have lost the category altogether, it doesn't mean that isn't something that still is active in the world. It means we just end up doing it by works. And we end up being susceptible to the lies of the devil. And so when the devil comes preaching, he comes preaching justification by avoidance. We're told in Timothy, he comes after specifically, he comes after marriage and sexuality. He comes after food, and he comes after the calendar, right? And we're justified by avoidance.
Because Timothy was dealing with demon-possessed culture, right? He was dealing with the same thing.
Exactly. And so he says, what are the doctrines of demons, right? And Timothy, the entire book of Timothy is built around the question of Adam in the garden, Adam and Eve in the garden, Adam's failure, and how to learn from Adam's failure to do what's right as the leadership of the church, as the pastors and elders and deacons of the church. They should be good. They should not fail where Adam did fail. Adam let the devil keep preaching. Right? Adam didn't stand against the falsehoods of the devil with the truth. Adam let his wife listen to the devil once he realized that it was demonic, and then he let his wife preach.
Wow!
When he
preached the sermon of the day,
preach the sermon of the day. Yeah, preach the sermon of the serpent. Of the serpent. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that's why Timothy 2 is, you've got Adam and Eve, and it ends with saying, Paul says, like, I don't allow.
I'm tweeting that, bro.
Right. I don't allow women to teach. Right. They don't get to preach the sermon because of the garden. Right? That's what he says. Right. That's the argument, because Adam was supposed to, and he failed. Now he did at the beginning of the day, but he didn't later in the day. Right. So Adam started by teaching Eve, you're not supposed, because Eve wasn't created yet when Adam was given the job or it was given the command to not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But when the serpent comes along and asks, Eve knows that they're not supposed to do that. Then Eve is tricked by the serpent, and Adam lets her then preach, or he hands over the preaching role to her, right after she has been listening to the serpent.
Well, he handed over all roles to her too, didn't he? Because at that point he was supposed to be the protector as well, so he's not protecting. He lets her tell him what the standards are. All the roles switch.
Yeah. And when she sees it was beautiful, good for food, and would make her wise, she takes and she eats and hands it to him. Right. She takes over the sacramental leadership because of Adam's failure to protect. So then Timothy 2:15 is, now she will be saved through childbearing, right? Eve was tricked, and Paul agrees Eve got tricked, right? Adam's the one that brought the human race into sin by letting Eve get tricked. And so when Eve confesses to God, I was tricked, she's telling the truth, and Paul agrees with her in Timothy. Paul says, yes, Eve was telling the truth, right? That was a confession. I got tricked. And you shouldn't be able to get tricked. But Adam was helping the serpent in that situation trick Eve with his silence. But then it says she will be saved through childbearing, and that's a reference back to Genesis 3:15, right? The promise is that through the womb, a savior would come. And then 3 verse 1, 1 Timothy 3 verse 1 is, now anyone who desires the office of overseer. Now he's just been talking about Adam failing as an overseer. So when he says, but if anyone desires the office of overseer, he desires a good thing. Let me tell you what it means to be good, what it means to have the right kind of character to be good as an overseer. And then he walks through the requirements for the office of elder. And then, in the midst of it, he says, and if he can't take care of his own household, how's he going to take care of the household of God well, right? That there's a fundamental, true allegorical connection between the man's ability, the man's faithfulness as a husband and father and his faithfulness as an elder, which is where Adam failed, right? And then both at once, because Eve was the entire congregation in that setup. And then he goes into deacons, and it's the same sort of thing, but it's not a teaching ministry, it's a service ministry. And then in 4, he goes into now the office of pastor, right? The sacramental office of minister. And I know there's disagreements about the number of offices and all of that, and that isn't the important thing in the scenario, because he says it protects by the word, which is what Adam failed to do. He heard the word, he spoke the word, but he didn't protect with the word. And Timothy is told, if you're going to war a good warfare, he needs to have his doctrine straight. He needs to understand the word, and then he needs to wield it against the lies of the devil. And that's when we're told the doctrines of demons will come, right? So the household of God, the garden of God, the church in the new covenant.
Go back. I got to catch this. He heard the word. He heard the word,
and then he's supposed to preach.
But he didn't protect by the word.
And then preach the truth and oppose the lies with the word. Right? That's how he wars a good warfare as a pastor. Right? And and because the devil continues to attack the garden of God, but the church is the garden of God now. Right? The Garden of Eden is, metaphorically, allegorically, historically, truly,
sure,
all of the ways, is the new garden of God. And we should expect the same sort of thing, right? The devil, with his lies, will come after the Eve of the new Adam. And the pastor is supposed to protect it. And so his job protecting women as a husband and father, women and children as a husband and father, is a central part of his preparation to have the kind of faith that you need to protect the church, right? Because it's the same sort of thing, but it's just you're protecting God's bride, Christ's bride, instead of your own. So, and then as that goes well, you get into chapter 5 and the need for a multi-generational church, because you need the wisdom of, once it's protected, then the wisdom that Eve was going to bring is brought by the widows in the church. The older women in the church become the logic of the passage is, well, of course you've got to talk about, then if you've got a well-protected church, where is the wisdom hidden that Eve was supposed to bring to Adam? Because that's what Genesis 2 is about, is the wisdom that Eve brings to Adam to be able to accomplish the dominion in the world. We should expect the church to have it, and it's going to be in the widows, and the older women in the church. That there's a deep wisdom that the world needs, that is cultivated and found in the older women in the church. And so if a widow who has served the church well doesn't have family to take care of her, then the church should you need her. So the church should make sure that she's well taken care of. Right. So that it's all Adam and Eve. It's all Adam and Eve in the garden logic, right? That makes sense of 1 Timothy. In the way I see and understand it. Well, that kind of logic, then the logic as a whole, I think we need to bring into our situation and say, well, where are those doctrines of demons, and how are we using the scriptures to oppose them, right? To protect the good things so that the good things flourish, right? We're not justified by opposing the bad things, right? We're justified by faith. And then what does faith bring into the world? Well, faith brings into the world the works that were prepared for us beforehand. And what are the works that were prepared for the church beforehand? It's the bringing of the wisdom for dominion into the world. And where are we going to find that? We're going to find that in well-loved women in the church, right? Just like in the Garden of Eden. And then the men receive and come to understand that wisdom by taking care of their wives and living in a community with well-loved and cared for and protected women, safe women that know they're safe. And then they take that understanding out into the world and take dominion and bring the world to its intended end, right? That's and we see that the world is not being that our nation is not being brought to its intended end, right? The number of the population is starting to decline. We're starting to back away from our cities, and they're reverting, to we've got a place that's being de-gardenized in a lot of ways. You look at a place like Detroit, once a great city, less. Communism, fascism always does this. You've got giant empty tracts of city in China now, because the one-child policy is demonic, right? So the devil doesn't want the world gardened because it reminds him of God. He doesn't want us functioning as gardeners because it reflects God, as people that have dominion over the world. It reflects God. He wants us giving up our authority and walking away from it, because our authority, when it's wielded properly, brings things to their intended end. He doesn't want that, right? And so one-child policy is a great demonic way of making sure there are fewer Chinese people in the world, so that you can have so that China will not be people won't take dominion of China and go get all those resources and become a powerful force for dominion in the world, right? A great book about this, it's called All the Trouble in the World, by P.J. O'Rourke, and he's got a chapter in there called Too Many of You and Just the Right Number of Me, about the policies of the World Health Organization, the policies of America that try to depopulate our enemies, the attempts to depopulate. Some evil stuff has gone on, especially the World Health Organization, of doing things that they know make it impossible for women to have children, right? To go in and lower the population of lots of areas of brown-skinned people, especially. that the World Health Organization has gone out and tried to make sure that populations go down. But that's because of the doctrine of demons. And so so homosexuality makes a lot of sense in that situation. You want fewer people to come into the world? Well, in that situation, even just men and women sleeping together outside of marriage isn't enough, because they could still have kids there. You gotta push all the way to something that won't ever make any children, because the devil wants fewer children.
I need to take that last half of everything you just said in the last 10 minutes and listen to that on repeat a couple times. So when you have a demon-possessed culture, you really need men who are godly men who fear the Lord. I keep thinking of Titus, when Paul writes to Titus and says, you need to finish up what I've started. And he makes it of first importance to put godly men in positions of offices that protect the church. He lists out what those godly men look like and where they are. He's put them in place. And then there's go ahead.
But you are protecting the church from the unscrupulous, but also from the scrupulous, because one of the things that the demons come in, the doctrine, part of the doctrine of demons is they want to make up rules, touch not, taste not rules, that control, but they control in such a way that it destroys community.
Yeah.
Right. So it pulls people away from one another. So, because it's not a matter, because protection isn't just a matter of saying we're the most scrupulous people, right? Protection is something that is protection from the things that destroy the community of the church. And sin does that, but it's really only unconfessed sin that does that, right? Confessed sin doesn't destroy the church, but but rules that replacing the justification by faith with justification by rules, whether it's corporate or individual, is one of the most destructive things. And so that's why demons come in saying, touch not, taste not. We're gonna get real scrupulous about holiness and ramp it up in here. That's just as destructive as, hey, we're not going to worry at all about sin.
Well, matter of fact, that's the first place. That's where it starts at. So if you got a church now, the bride of Christ, that is listening to the serpent on these things, or you're not, and you're acting and listening and being like the first Adam, where you're letting that sermon be preached in the garden, then guess what? You're going to have a demon-possessed culture right there inside of your church. It's going to bleed out into the rest of society.
Yeah, and because what's crazy is when they want to go find, when it's time to go cast out a demon, they don't just find them out amongst the pagans. They also find them in the synagogue.
Right? Synagogue of Satan, right?
Yeah. So by the time you get to the end of the end of the book of Acts, the synagogues are now being called the synagogues of Satan, right? So it's 61, 62, whenever Revelation was written. Now these synagogues are synagogues of Satan. Now, when Jesus shows up, there are demons there, but you don't yet have the declaration that the synagogue system has been given over to Satan, right? He cleanses it. Jesus goes around cleansing all sorts of things. Now, it's not enough to be cleansed. You also have to be filled with the Spirit, with the Holy Spirit, because otherwise there's an opening left for the repossession which I think is, I mean, I think that's what leads to the violence of 66 to 70 AD. You start having riotous violence break out in Jerusalem. It gets very, very bad.
It goes that same cycle.
Yeah, that same cycle again, to the point where in 69 the Roman Empire starts. They're so concerned, that because the bodies are piling up on one end of Jerusalem, and they're it's like a public health problem. It smells so bad, right? So it's very, if you read Josephus, it's really interesting because the Roman Empire, they've kind of worked out a deal, like, oh, the Jerusalem kind of gets to run its own thing until they start killing each other and the bodies pile up, and you've got like, okay, this is a public health issue, and it's like this group runs in and kills all the priests, and then the next group runs in and kills all that group, and then the next group runs in and kills all that group, and they're just tossing the bodies, right? It becomes an incredibly violent city, but it wasn't like that, right, when Jesus shows up. But he does find demons existing happily in the synagogues, right? So it doesn't become really a system given over to the devil.
Well, I mean,
with a systematic possession.
I think you brought this up before too, but you have the Levitical code of the priest cleansing, and Jesus does that. That's why you have the double cleansings, right? Jesus comes in, cleanses the temple, and sees if anything grows back, and he's found to be unclean. He's like, hey, this is over. This is, we're going to take this place out. Right. It's growing mold again.
and because sometimes people don't realize that Jesus cleansed the temple twice. It's 3.5 years apart. He cleanses the temple at the beginning of his ministry, and then he comes back and he cleanses it again. Which I believe lines up with Leviticus and the house leprosy laws. And so when he cleanses it that second time, he walks out and says, not one stone will be left upon another, which is what you're supposed to do with a house that you've cleansed and the leprosy grows back, is not allow one stone to be left upon another. And so I think you've got, there's a cosmic, Leviticus is a cosmic book, and should be read as a cosmic book. And it's a cosmic book that, while they were in the land, was symbolically enacted, right? It was all these small stories, this cosmic story that was symbolically enacted. I mean, I would say one of the most helpful things for me in learning story theory was Gordon Wenham's book on Leviticus. It's very, very helpful because he shows how the symbolic stories function.
Gordon Wemmick?
Gordon Wenham.
Wenham.
Wenham, W-E-N. I don't know. It's it's this one, the New International Commentary in the Old Testament.
I just bought another. Okay.
Yeah. He also, his commentary on Numbers is also really, it's got a whole section. He's just like your average Presbyterian dude, right? But his book on Numbers has this whole section on cosmic numerology. It's amazing.
Jason, wow.
But you're not supposed to say numerology, though. What do we call it? Because it's definitely not numerology.
This whole commentary set, I just bought the Proverbs version of this commentary set. Is this whole set pretty good? New International Commentary on the Old Testament.
Craigie on Deuteronomy is awesome. Wenham's stuff is really good. I don't know if I've read beyond that and the Old Testament set.
Okay. Yeah, because I got Bruce
I started buying
Walk
at the time. Yeah, Bruce Waltke, he's really good on the literary stuff.
Yeah. I gotta go back and listen to that again. That's really good. I wish we had more time. I don't know how we get to 2 hours, but we do. I gotta go back and fix some of this editing. But man, I think I'm not done. I think we need to have another week on this. I'm not done here because I want to press in on this last half, which is when you have a demon possessed culture, the way you deal with it is in gardening properly, right? Like that's part of it. But then, I wonder where Paul is dealing with this with Timothy, but he's not, you're not casting out demons, but this is somehow have an effect. I want to talk about how that effect happens as you know what I mean?
I think that the man
we didn't even talk about calendar.
I think calendar. I think the man amongst the tombs though that's the key.